Talk to Peter Bleksley, former Metropolitan Police detective, of course. We've got much to discuss. Very, very good morning to you, Peter.
Good morning.
Now, we've said it before, I'll say it again. We've had loads of people out in the streets of London over the weekend flying Hezbollah flags, Hamas flags, signs that say Hezbollah are not terrorists, signs that say I love Hezbollah. The police made 2 arrests, basically, out of 17 for people supporting prescribed groups. They put a few pictures out of about another 10, but I would put to you that there were hundreds of people there, maybe thousands, chanting anti-Semitic things, breaking the law in all sorts of ways, once again, not facing any punishment.
Well, for nearly a year now, the Metropolitan Police has been guilty of appeasement with regards to these pro-Palestinian marches, in that they haven't made arrests swiftly, effectively, at the time, in anywhere near the numbers that they need to. There's footage of police officers standing very close to protesters who were spouting hateful and illegal bile, who need to be arrested. And in total, as you did point out, the Met Police arrested 17 people on Saturday, but then yesterday they posted the pictures of a further 11 people that they'd like to identify. What they should be doing is being more proactive, acting at the time, making arrests and sending out a clear message that this behaviour is unacceptable on the streets of Britain.
Yes, because they put out some guidance before the march started to say that you risk arrest if you do show support for either of these 2 prescribed groups, and many of the people doing it were masked up, so they won't be able to identify them, and therefore they won't face any punishment.
And let's look at the inconsistencies in the language that the Met use around these events compared to the language that they used when there was rioting a few short weeks ago. On that occasion, Keir Starmer went very public and was talking about the full force of the law.
Yeah.
And the Met Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, said that people rioting would be met by overwhelming force. OK, rightly so, many would argue. But now the language around these marches is completely softened, toned down and very, very different. And therefore, that leads to appeasement. And what happens when you appease people who are criminals, who are wrongdoers? They become empowered. And so the hate gets more, the posters continue, and nothing really gets properly done.
And members of the Jewish community feel very, very frightened that these people are able to roam the streets, making threats to them, in some cases death threats. I think one guy was heard to say, you know, freedom fighters will come for all of you and kill you all.
One of the women whose photographs appeared yesterday, I saw footage of her making deeply sickening gestures about her hair towards Jewish people. And this, by all accounts, is a reference to how Jewish people had their heads shaved before they entered the gas chambers of Auschwitz, Birkenau and other murderous concentration camps. For a woman to be allowed to do that on the streets of London with quite simply no arrest being made at the time is very, very weak-willed policing. And of course it makes people ask themselves, well, why are there these inconsistencies between the policing of one public order event and another? They are completely different. They are inconsistent. And so, of course, the expression two-tier policing gets woven into our everyday language.
Yes, well, of course, Keir Starmer was quoted as saying there's no such thing as two-tier policing, it's not an issue. He was also quoted back in Northern Ireland in August as saying that Sue Gray was not causing any kind of problems behind the scenes at Downing Street, and any suggestion that she was complete nonsense. So, you know, you can't really trust anything he says, can you?
When you have a Prime Minister who's been in office for such a short space of time, to have his words really spoken on one hand and then completely different things happen on the other, it's deeply, deeply worrying for this great nation that was a flagship democracy, and we still cling to that, with a sterling reputation throughout the world for truth, honesty. To see that being shredded is deeply, deeply worrying for so many of us.
Indeed. The other big story this morning we're talking about, more illegal migrants in the UK than anywhere else in Europe, 745,000 illegal migrants in the UK, pretty much putting to bed the notion that all of these people coming here illegally are a very small drop in the ocean, if you pardon the pun, and they don't really account for very much. Well, that's going to be up towards 1 million people extra who have come here illegally and who have not been forced to leave. All right, and we meanwhile find out that 1 in 50 Albanians in the UK is in jail. We can't deport them, seemingly, even though we've got an agreement to deport them to Albania.
Over 950 people arrived on these boats, on 17 boats, on one single day at the weekend. Over 950. Where are they all going to be placed? Who are they? What's their backgrounds? Have they got any criminal records? What are their intentions when they arrive in the UK? And so it goes on and on and on. And each and every day, this nation becomes less safe than it previously was. It is a deep stain on our government and on the reputation of this nation.
It is absolutely right. Now, I've finally got some good news for you, Peter, to cheer you up. And it looks to me like this was shot in Regent's Park in London. I'm not entirely sure, but it's some underlay we've got here of a cyclist. You can see him going through a red light there. There's some people waiting to go because they're in cars who have to stop at a red light. But amazingly, there's a police van that sees it, right? The police van put its siren on, chased him down the road, pulled him up and did him.
Yes, good.
Hurrah!
And rightfully so. I long bemoan the demise of traffic units who used to patrol the streets. They were feared by police as much as they were by the public because they'd show a police officer no mercy whatsoever if our driving wasn't up to scratch. And whilst we gave them a lot of stick, they actually did a very good job and were very effective. And now, with more people than ever driving on our roads, drunk and under the influence of drugs, we need traffic cops back on the streets.
And who knows, you know, maybe that cyclist will think twice now the next time he sees a red light. He'll actually stop at it in case he gets another ticket. So I applaud those police officers, and it just goes to show you, if you've got police on the streets, you get better results, don't you?
The public want the police on the streets arresting and prosecuting bad people. And it's blatantly obvious. All the evidence is there. Whenever I post positive policing stories on social media, there's a huge response with the public showing absolute support for officers who get stuck in, who arrest bad people, who aren't afraid to have a roll around on the pavement with them. Do what the public want. They want the police arresting bad people. They don't want any of the fat and the nonsense and the wokery.
Absolutely right. Peter Bleksley, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.